Hello, you're back with the single malt review. It is time for our fifth and final Kavalan sampler.
This is the final Kavalan.
This is one I've been particularly looking forward to out of all of these. Is the Brandy Oak, as you've seen from the video title. Don't I act like it's a new surprise or new information?
Potentially the rarest.
Yeah.
The rarest, and this isn't even purported to be a finish, maturation. Really only shows up in cognac finishes because they're really the only ones classy enough to warrant the headline for most Scotch examples. So very interested to see what this comes through.
So we have a 54% ABV, another hearty offering here. Not quite up to the strength of the Solist, but higher than the sort of more standard watered down offerings at a mere 43 or so, which is to say industry standard.
You know, it smells pretty jolly good, and I've said this before. Yeah. However, this one...
It is more pale than most of the Kavalans in this set.
Well, that makes sense, because the brandy will have already scourged a lot of the oak tannin out. This actually has notes of very old grain whiskey. There's a lot of fudge going on in here. Very, very sweet. Absolutely opulently sweet.
It has there's a little bit of a bite to it though. That's nice, yeah.
And Russian fudge, which is what I always get from once grain whiskey sort of goes above, I don't know, 25 years old. Once it starts to be conspicuously old grain whiskey, you do get this. It gets this fudginess, which I get every single time.
I did talk about the rarity of whiskey that's been matured in the spirit barrel. This obviously excludes the likes of bourbon. Bourbon cask whiskey is some of the most abundant in the world, but there are similarities to be drawn here in the way a bourbon cask exhibits a certain kind of spiciness and woodiness that's happening here too. Whoa. Only very differently. Have you just been in for a taste?
That's pretty zingy whiskey.
Okay, let's go.
This is zingy. This is zingy in the way that the other ones weren't.
Oh, that's hot. Pardon me.
Why is that one such a bull banger? That doesn't make any sense. That's the same strength.
Perhaps younger, perhaps just how the cask is manifesting.
Holy moly. Yeah, that one isn't gentle in the slightest. I like the flavours, but yeah, this is going to need water for sure. This is
the brandy is strong here. I've had relatively little brandy in my life. We've even, I think, sampled occasional cognac on the show over the years. But
we've looked at, I think, exactly one cognac, and we've looked at a Californian brandy, which was fine, but probably not.
We tried the occasional brandy off camera, or ones that wound up on the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
This is a very brandy tasting whiskey, but also with some whiskey flavors too, obviously.
I think the nature of the slightly battling spirit of this one is because the brandy's already been in that cask, which itself may have been a bourbon cask. This could be the third spirit to occupy this thing. Is that the cask is so well rinsed that there's probably quite a lot of spirit-driven character coming through here, and not the out of control cask opulency that we have kind of grown accustomed to with the other Kavalan releases.
I have had high proof cognac and Armagnac in the past, and I recall similar heat. That's just bringing that potency.
Yeah, because this is of all that we've tasted, this is the first Kavalan whiskey I would even begin to entertain the suggestion of calling dry.
Okay.
It is only dry in comparison to its fellows. It is not dry in comparison to the rest of whiskey worldwide. But in terms of the Kavalan, the breadth of their range, this is certainly drier, even drier than the peat.
And just a little more water. Else. Water is doing amazing things here. It's kind of turning into the concentrated essence of all that is good in Scotch whiskey. It's got a very, kind of like Highland character to it, just the sweeter parts of Speyside. Okay.
The water has fixed this whiskey. It has taken the teeth out somewhat. It has devenomed it somewhat. And for all that talk about it being a dry whiskey, a little bit of dryness still on the nose. That has sweetened the palate up like wonkers levels. That is huge.
It is the most Scotch of the Kavalans, I believe.
I think so.
Flavour-wise, even compared to, say, the peated version.
This one, the spirit character is still the most exposed, I think, than we've seen in everything we've tasted, which is very, very valuable because finally we're getting a glimpse of what is Kavalan as a spirit.
Yeah.
And what it is a really, really, really heavy distillate. You talk about heavy spirits in Scotland, and the famous ones are like Malt and Lagavulin is probably the king of the big, heavy, sweaty, weighty spirits. This one I think is probably heavier than all of them. I don't know how their stills are put together, but I'm imagining very, very minimal reflux here, just banging that spirit through with all of the goodies still attached, not too much purification here, because the spirit character that I'm tasting, very, very, very weighty. But as for tasting notes, there's a bit of rum and raisin. There's some very, very stewed fruits.
I'm getting a lot of it rum and raisin.
Stewed dried fruits, sort of stewed raisins again, which we got in the peated. There's some stewed plums and currants, quite a lot of currants. There is less of the chili pepper, but...
In fact, that's reminding me a little of certain rum cask Scotch whiskies I've tried over many years. I'm going to add even more water.
I think it can probably take it. Let's take
towards this to 40%.
Take this to breaking
territory.
Point. See if it gives up before we do. Because you can see it. Never before has chill filtration been quite so evident. That's getting distinctly pallid there.
It is reminding me of, you take a stronger Speyside whiskey and dilute that down to a more sensible drinking strength, and this is the kind of like the tracks are converging. They're turning into very similar whiskies.
With this much water, and this is probably in the realm of too much water now, it's really quite wooden. There's a lot of wood tannin, a little wood grain coming through.
Right.
Which I don't mind at all. If, of all of them, I think this one might be a little bit nice with a ice cube, just a big fat ice cube, so you could gently sip it on its journey from high strength down to quite dilute. Which is, if I am going to adulterate my single malts, that's typically the route that I choose. But this one really, really has changed remarkably from full strength all the way down to what's probably under 40 now, realistically.
It has absolutely changed. I don't know if it's improved though. I have to say,
I think there's a point where it was improving, and it has now stopped improving. Now it's a little bit bitter. It's a little bit hard.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of that wet wood coming through.
Some of the tinned fruit, bitter flavours. Yeah.
So it's a broad whiskey for sure. I'm trying to quantify. Is it good? You know, is it what I'm after? And I think by and large it is. It's just a bit, I don't know if it's the strongest contender. Its flexibility certainly does it in its favour. From starting off unapproachable, becoming actually really rather good, and then ending up not unapproachable, but a little bit astringent, you'd say.
I think it is, at some points on that flavour journey, it is the most closely aligned to what I think of as traditional single malt whiskey flavours. It aligns more closely with flavour profiles of certain Scotch whiskey regions.
Yeah.
But it is also, I think, it's lacking some of the impact of the gravitas and flair of the other Kavalan offerings. It is, I'd say, my least favourite of the bunch.
I think if Kavalan's thing is cask-driven bombast, and I think we can all agree that it probably is, that is the energy that Kavalan brings. This one has the least of it, and I think ends up being the lesser whiskey for it. Though it was fascinating to glimpse the Kavalan spirit, or at least as close as we're going to get to it. I just don't think, potentially with more age, whack a couple more years on this one, and it might be really doing it. But for the time being, it's an 83 from me. What do you think?
I'm going a little higher at 86, but it's still the lowest score I've given to a Kavalan whiskey. It's definitely not a bad whiskey. It is certainly enjoyable. It's interesting. It has things going on, but it has the less of the wow factor, less just the flavours just aren't as pleasant to me.
So that begs the question: Kavalan as a whole, elevate it there. Is it still good? Yes. It has not, after winning all those awards, it has not in any way diminished. I think it may be judged a little more critically these days than it used to. Now that people are used to the Kavalan explosion, it's maybe being looked at with a bit more scrutiny. Is it worth the prices they're charging? That's really up to one's budget. Because even the most even the fairest commentator would have to say that those are some pretty jolly high prices when you've got not necessarily analogous whiskies, but whiskies in a similar vein for potentially half or less than half being made other parts of the world, namely Scotland, where they're extremely available. So that's really an individual decision you have to make. But to get a grip on Kavalan, which we can now say that we have, to understand it, I think I've learned something as a whiskey as a whiskey citizen. If someone asked me about Kavalan, I could say, oh yeah, no, it does this, and it certainly does it with a great deal of aplomb. Just like the neighbours with their chainsaw. But never mind.
Apologies if that is intruding on the soundscape.
Sorry, we're almost finished. They chose the right moment.
Like we often talk about, I especially talk about whenever we got to one of these sampling sets, I'll talk about a whiskey journey, a journey through XYZ location, distillery, and so forth. But with it, there's never been more true than with this sampler here. We've tasted an abundance of utterly unique, potent, powerful, expertly curated flavours. So it's been a real, a flavour journey, honestly.
In a way excellent stuff.
It is more literal than it's ever been.
And so that's all you ever need to know about Kavalan Distilling. We've cracked it. No more will ever have to be said. The definitive resource.
In this particular tasting set, if you can get a hold of it, then absolutely go for it. It's a great way to try them all.
Dave did the maths, and actually the numbers round out. It's actually one of the cheaper ways of drinking Kavalan. So actually, there you go.
So if you were to buy all 5 of these as an actual bottle of either the 43% or the cask strength Solus discretion, you'll be quite the poorer for it, financially speaking. This way, though, about on par with a bottle of a mid-range, mid-price single malt scotch.
And work back to 46% from 54. Add the round the 0, add the turn the 6 upside down is actually a 9, and then it's basically the same thing. So there you go. The ideal way of interfacing with Kavalan. So I hope that was of some use to those punters out there. If you have opinions, then please opine in the comments. I do read them, and sometimes I even respond, but you never know. Only one way to find out. Unless you get auto-moderated, I hardly ever look in there, so just make sure YouTube's pays its dues and you'll be fine. Anyway, Slanger, we were back with, in fact, we're already on track with these special scandies, and that's going to be a whole other thing. So keep all your limbs inside the vehicle for that.
One new and interesting whiskey region to another new and interesting whiskey region.
Yes, a very different one.
It's a good time to be us, I think.
It's a good time to be sipping, for sure. Sun's coming out.
It's just raining for good whiskey.
It is. All right, Slanger, we're back very soon.